Well, hello. How's everyone doing? Um, eh, Today we seem to be having some type of solar flare up or something, and I just want to make sure you guys understand that that is why I'm doing the different language movie type of thing. Anyway, I just want to say thank you and welcome to everyone. And please bear with us. You know how this is. Sometimes it goes great, sometimes it doesn't. And I hope at some point it um, just evens out. But I know my guest is so good and so great. And on his side, everything is running perfect. So who would have thunk it? That I know what it is. You guys don't want to hear me, and it's okay. It's okay. So, welcome, Dr. Randall Hansen. How are you today?
Hi, Glenda. I am very well, thank you, even with our technical difficulties.
I am so sorry, but sometimes, it's I don't even know what it is anymore. I
Yeah.
just run with it because you still look good, and you know what? I'm going to make sure you look even better.
Thank you.
There you go. Hold on. Let me just see. Let me change this. There we go.
Ah,
So they could see you best. So tell us about um, yourself and how you got here and, everything you have to really share with us. Um,
thank you. I will. Thank you. I've watched a bunch of your videos, and I just hope I don't disappoint your guests because some of your other or your viewers, because some of your guests have incredible talents, or they're visiting with aliens, or they can go into a different dimension. And I think my only gift is truth seeking. So that's going to be the platform I kind of sit on today. And I guess I want to start off with a couple broad statistics about why I do what I do. And then we can go back and I can talk about kind of my health journey and then my healing journey.
mhm,
But if you look at statistics, 77% of Americans self report that they did unhealthy coping mechanisms to deal with their mental health. So, unhealthy coping mechanisms meaning alcohol, drugs, food, gambling,
mhm,
all these things. And so that is to me a massive red flag when three-quarters of the population is suffering from these things. And then if we
mhm,
look at the health side, more than 90% of us are metabolically unhealthy, meaning we have at least one metabolic issue. And if that doesn't scream health crisis, in fact, more than half the population has hypertension, which I think is one of the two canaries in the coal mine that I use for health. And
mhm,
that number is the highest it's ever been. So that's kind of where my lens is. I look and I see people suffering, whether it's physically suffering, mentally suffering, and I feel like my mission that's come down from above, and we'll talk about that during the healing journey, but is that I just want to get this message out there that healing is possible. We can, yes, almost all of us experience trauma in our lives, especially
mhm,
childhood trauma, but we can overcome that, and we can live better lives not haunted by that past. And
mhm,
then with health, almost I think it's 8 out of 10 of the most common causes of death in the U.S. are lifestyle diseases that can be preventable and even sometimes reversed. So it's a message, sort of maybe gloomy on one hand, that boy, we don't look so great, but hope on the other hand, that we have the power, we have the healer
mhm,
within ourselves to live a better life and to make those changes. But we also live in a culture that promotes convenience, and so we have this battle that we're fighting between, I want a magic pill, or I want whatever, rather than doing the work.
mhm.
But
Yes.
if you want, I'll start with my health journey. And
Please.
okay, so I guess almost 30 years ago now, I had been, just I was married, had kids. So I was doing that, sort of crazy lifestyle. I was also unhealed, which is a kind of important point to all this. But I read a book that said that sugar is the greatest evil to ever enter U.S. households, and I thought, as probably most people do, that's extreme. Sugar is the most evil ever, and because it's in everything. So I thought,
Right.
it can't be, it can't be. And I decided to experiment. So I said, well, I was drinking about maybe 1 or 2 cans of soda a day. So I said, well, I'm just going to quit soda for a month and I'll just see. Because I thought that was where most of my sugar was. Well, that was where a lot of my sugar was coming from, but I thought that was where all the sugar was coming from.
Mm-hmm.
And so I quit the sodas. And in that month, I think I lost about 12, 13 pounds. Um, my thinking improved. I didn't have these little crashes in the day where the sugar crash
Mm-hmm.
happened. And that led me, so I thought, well, that's fantastic. And then something inside me said, well, where else can I cut sugar? And that's when I started looking at all the ingredients list in the stores, and 80% or so of all the food items in the grocery store are what we call ultra processed, which just means they go through extreme amounts of processing to get to the point of where we are today.
Right.
Uh, And so I started looking at the ingredients, and almost all these 80% have had sugar in them. I mean, from breads to salad dressings to condiments to crackers. I mean, frozen pizzas. I mean, everything you can imagine.
Right.
And so that led me to this sort of that lit up my truth seeker. I need to investigate what the heck is going on here. And it really started in this whole kind of collapse of our food system. And it's not just the food system; it's also the farming system. But started the late 1950s when President Eisenhower had a heart attack, and before this time, heart attacks were pretty rare. And certainly never a president, certainly not someone who's a war hero, kind of a
Mm-hmm.
stallion kind of guy.
Right.
And he actually had it on the golf course, which I think is kind of funny because presidents and they're golfing. But uh, and that led to this crisis of what could possibly cause this virile man to have a heart attack. Now he was a social drinker and he was
Mm-hmm.
a smoker, and we know those two things are definitely major risk factors for
Mm-hmm.
heart disease.
Mm-hmm.
But there was one researcher, Ansel Keys, who decided he was his duty to find out, and he did this research, and he determined that it was fat that caused the heart attack, not sugar, not the cigarettes, not the alcohol, but fat. And that began the very long and still partly to this day war on fat. The war on fat led to the war on cholesterol, which led to worries about meats and eggs and dairy, and that's now also both the fat theory has been discounted and the cholesterol theory has been discounted because of newer research, better research.
Right. Right.
So, um, so my journey was first the sugar,
Mm-hmm.
and then I started looking. Well, what else is kind of driving my health problems? And so I looked at refined carbs. I got rid of the white flours, the white rice, lost more weight, felt better, stronger. And then as I started looking at the farming situation and what we've done conventionally with farming, depleting the soil, so much pesticide use that I started worrying about that impacting my health as well. switch more to organic foods, and then also buying locally as much as I can. We have like you, we only have farmers markets during summer, basically because the weather.
Right.
You know,
Right.
we're
Exactly.
yeah. If I were in California, we farmers markets year round, but where I
Right.
am, so in the summers as much as possible, and then the last 5 years, so since I've built my house here, I've also grown at least some of my own food because I think that's an important thing for people to do too, just to reconnect
Hmm.
back with nature and
Yes.
understand where our food comes from. It's so funny to see students and you ask, where does this whatever hamburger come from, and then be like,
Right.
oh, the store. It's like, well, yeah, okay, technically yes, but uh, so I just found, just from changing my diet, being more mindful. I
Hmm.
also switched from, I joke that in the height of my trauma and the height of I was working two jobs, I was using workaholism as a badge of honor when
Right.
it was really hiding my trauma. I was trying to block my trauma. But when I was at the height of this, I joked that as I was driving home sometimes, my car would automatically steer into the fast food restaurant, almost like muscle memory, and it's like, oh, I guess we're having fast food tonight. And so I understand, especially, parents with young kids, or both parents working, or only one family member that's even the adult in the family. So I get the rush for convenience, or the need
Right.
for convenience sometimes, but I
Mhm.
would also love to encourage people to start cooking at home again. In the
Mhm.
1980s, microwaves just sort of swept through our our households, and now I can't imagine any house, any apartment, any kitchen without a microwave.
Mhm.
And so, but the microwave has dominated, taking over the stove and the oven. We either get frozen stuff and heat it up in the microwave, or we bring home takeout and we heat it up in the microwave, or the next day we heat it up.
Right.
And the kitchen has become kind of a reheating station rather than a cooking station. So that's the other thing I would
Mhm.
just love to encourage people is, just even if you've never done it, you don't have to be a gourmet. You don't have to have 5-course meal. I promote a lot of 30-minute, 60-minute meals on my website and my books, because I think it's important to realize that people don't have a lot of time to invest
Mhm.
in cooking. But it comes down to, what do you value?
Right.
And so for me, number one first was health, because before I changed my diet, I was bordering on insulin resistance and
Mhm.
pre-diabetes, and I was gaining weight, of course, as typical,
Mhm.
and brain fog, and of course I was sleeping poorly because of these two jobs. But we all have to make the commitment for ourselves. What do we value? And I just, luckily 30 years ago or so, I decided, well, health is number one for me, and so I just changed it, not all at once, because that would be crazy and almost impossible. But so, like I said, like I did, okay, just soda for the month.
Right.
Let's see how do I feel? And I will warn people, if you love sugar, and like I said, it's in almost everything. So our taste buds are really wanting that. When
Mhm.
you when you first quit, there will be some cravings, maybe some hardcore cravings. And research shows that actually about 12% of the population is addicted to sugar. So
Mhm.
they actually have to go through some serious withdrawal. Um, and then about a third of us don't have, I don't have, almost minimal effects. So, but then,
Mhm.
so just take one change at a time. You don't, so maybe quit sodas, or uh, if you're in the South, quit the sweet tea. I mean, sweet tea is maybe even worse than sodas. I don't know how much sugar's in there, but just one step at a time. Then when
Right.
you're acclimated with that, say, okay, well now let's, yeah, maybe I have, so just the sodas, and maybe okay, let me cut out my morning donut or whatever it might be, and just
Right.
start slowly making those changes, and you'll see pretty dramatic results after a couple months. I can guarantee that because it's just so prevalent, and so and I look at, and so if people, and I worry about younger people the most because people under 40 have grown up with this food their entire lives. At least
Mm-hmm.
people like myself and people over 40, they at least had they had their formative years with better food quality than
Yes. Yes.
so I
Definitely.
look at an apple pie. Grandma's apple pie
Mm-hmm.
would would have like six ingredients. They have
Yeah.
apples, sugar, cinnamon, and then for the and butter, and then for the crust, flour, water,
Yep.
butter maybe, and then that's it.
Yeah.
You look at a pie in a grocery store, apple pie in a grocery store, and it has something anywhere from 18 to 20 ingredients.
Mm-hmm. And
Not
some
your
of them you
grandma's
can't
apple
even,
pie.
and some you
Yeah,
cannot even pronounce.
exactly.
You're
Exactly.
like, what is this stuff? But yes, yes,
And the crazy
very
part is
shocking.
sometimes they put in, like for the apple pie, they'll add natural apple flavoring.
Right.
Wait, doesn't that come from the apples? And so again, that's
So what are you using for the apples then? Are they really apples or
right.
right?
Right. Exactly. And I think in some of these cases, it's not apples or
Yeah.
some. I mean, that's maybe the extreme, but I mean,
Yeah.
in other situations, I'm trying to think of the food product. It actually said not made from whatever it was. It's like, it was some sort of fruit thing. And it said,
Right.
grapefruit thing, and said, not made from actual grapes. Okay. Then,
Yes, exactly.
but the problem is no one reads the fine print.
Mm.
We look at the front of the package and it says healthy, or that's the worst thing when it says healthy and it's not. But it might say all natural. It might say something like that. And we go, oh, good. I want to try to be a little healthier.
Right.
And so again, just encourage you to flip that over and look at the back, because the front's all marketing, all I would say lies, but we can, mistruths, whatever, misleading. But
Stretching
yeah,
the truth.
stretching, yeah, yeah. But the back, and even the back, they don't have to tell the whole truth because there's still loopholes there, but they at least have to list the ingredients in the order that they're from the most
Right.
used to the least used, and also the carbs and the fats and all that
Mhm.
are in the nutrition label. But so yeah, so I would just say, for everybody, if you feel like you're slowing down, or you're things that aren't quite normal for your age, look at your diet, look at what you're eating, and you don't have to do anything drastic. One of my books is called it has diet in the name, and I called it that because there are so many diet books out there. I wanted diet in there so it would pull
Right.
up in a keyword search,
Right.
even though it's what many reviewers call the anti-diet book, and that's what I call it as well, because there's no one diet that fits everybody. I love watching the carnivores and the vegans just argue it out, and it's so silly because there's no reason for that. And the
Right.
Mediterranean diet, which is so hyped, is a decent diet, but the lifestyle behind that diet is almost more important than the diet, and people don't realize that. They just think, oh, the diet's what I need to do.
Right.
And the key is, for me, is everyone needs to find that right mix of foods that work for them.
Hmm.
For me, it's I guess I'm an omnivore,
Hmm.
um, and so I eat both meats and veggies and fruits and all that, and it's a fairly keto-ish diet that I maintain, but I don't push that on anybody else.
Hmm.
You have to find, my wife eats slightly differently because she's different than I am. She has a different
Right.
metabolism and everything else. And so for everybody, just experiment. So, yes, on carnivore, people lose a lot of weight because it's an elimination diet because you're eliminating everything but meat, basically, or eggs sometimes, depending on how strict you are.
Right.
But that it's probably some carnivores say it's sustainable. I think probably it's not because your body keeps losing weight until maybe too far. I've had a couple people that have gotten off carnivore because they couldn't stop losing weight. So the point is just again, find what works for you. And the
Mm-hmm.
other thing I'll add is you don't have to be overweight to be unhealthy. So yes,
Mm-hmm.
there's a weight crisis, there's an obesity crisis happening, and a lot of that is from the sugar and the simple carbs. But you can be fairly thin and be unhealthy. And in fact, some
Mm-hmm.
of these fitness people argue with me and say, well, as long as I do my 2 hours at the gym, I can have my McDonald's or I can have my, you know, dripping sweet latte or whatever else. And I'm like, no, that's not true. Yes, fitness is a key part of health,
Right.
but you can't. Even Jack LaLanne, the great guru of fitness from back in the day, said
Mm-hmm.
you can't out fitness a bad diet or you can't out exercise a bad diet. And
Exactly.
so the diet's number one. You work on that. Listen to yourself. Listen to your body.
Mm-hmm.
And even after every meal, how do I feel? Am I sleepy now? Is my stomach gurgling or whatever? And then just say, "Oh, maybe that's not a good food for me. Let me try something different," and work from there. But so that's basically the health journey. I have lots of articles on my website that are free, so you don't have to buy any of my books. I'm a big believer in getting this message out there. So that's been my health journey really, and still I've still learned things. Like I didn't stop using seed oils until I guess now about 8 years ago because I just didn't know that vegetable oils, the history of vegetable oils, which is a crazy story. They were originally designed for during the Industrial Revolution for machinery,
Mm-hmm.
so that canola oil could work in your chainsaw or your whatever. And then they found the bigger market is actually for food, not for machinery. And they also developed better oils for machinery. And so it sort of got phased out of machines. And then all these vegetable oils that we use today, by the way, soybean oil, which is also sometimes called vegetable oil in the store and in ingredients list, is the number one calorie that most people consume in the ultra processed standard American diet. And we consume almost 3/4 of a cup of soybean oil a day if you're eating this ultra processed
Wow.
diet. And it's just crazy. So again, it's not so much that seed oils are evil, although I think they are unhealthy, but
Mm-hmm.
it's the quantity that we are consuming them that we've never seen so much in the past. And the same thing with sugar. We have never consumed so much sugar. But part of that low fat craze that happened in the 1980s,
Mm-hmm.
because, oh God, fat's bad. So we took out the good fats and
Mm-hmm.
replaced it with bad fats and sometimes also with added sugar. So we made these
Right.
foods unhealthier.
Yes.
And that's still the case today. You still see nutritionists saying, get that low fat yogurt. No, get the full fat yogurt, but get the plain yogurt, not with the horrible sweetened fruit. Add your own
Right.
fruit to it later.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah,
Yes. No. I'm a big believer that it's quantity, even though sometimes my health isn't as great, but that's complicated by other things. But
yeah.
the whole idea is moderation. You know, I, I I'm a big believer that you should own a crock pot or a slow
Yes.
cooker.
Yep.
If you need a meal and you don't have the time to cook, you could throw it all in there, fresh, no sugar, not or anything like that. And
Yep.
in before the 1950s, 60s, and all that other stuff, or even the 80s, we used to use brown sugar, which
Yep.
was less processed than the white sugar that's out here now.
Yeah.
And so it's um, very different. Because even for baking pies, the brown sugar looked better because it also browned the
Yep.
the 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 crust and the filling and everything. It tasted more consistent.
Yeah.
So
Agreed. Agreed.
it, it
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
unbelievable.
Yeah, I agree with you. I agree with you on almost everything. The moderation is truly important and a great starting point, and especially just moving in the direction of again cooking at
Hmm.
home,
Hmm.
using more raw ingredients. And I love the crock pot is a brilliant. I guess people have instant pots. You can do
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
I grew up with a great role model. My mom actually would do menu planning on the weekends and have the whole menu for the week set
Hmm.
up, go to shopping, get all the ingredients, do some prep on Sunday, and
Yeah.
then the meals just come out, just flow out. And we've, again, convenience, it's like, oh, I don't want to do that. I don't want to create menu planning or whatever. But
Right.
it was such a foundation for me. And I just think it's wonderful. So, yes, any kind of meal planning is great. So, the only thing I would
Hmm.
say is if and I just had this discussion with a nutritionist yesterday who said, we shouldn't be demonizing any food. And I get that to a point but the problem is there's so much noise in this area. One person saying, still saying, don't eat, I still see people saying, limit your eggs or don't eat eggs. And that's been disproven for a decade or more than a
Yep.
decade.
Hmm.
So, but sugar, and I would encourage people, don't just believe me. There's a great doctor, Dr. Robert Lustig, who wrote a book called Metabolical. He's writing a new book now. He is an evangelist about the dangers of sugar because it impacts our liver, our
Hmm.
gut, our overall health, and our brains. We haven't really talked about triglycerides, but in metabolic health, triglycerides more than cholesterol are a key indicator, and triglycerides are basically the fat that's in our blood.
Hmm.
And the amount of sugar we have and refined carbs, the more fat, because it's not fat that makes us fat. Isn't that a great line that was developed probably by the sugar industry, actually?
Oh.
Fat makes you fat. No, fat does not make you fat. Sugar the sugar and refined carbs are the drivers of that. And so Robert Lustig, and I support that, and there are many others that do as well, that get it down to as low as possible. That doesn't mean on your birthday or whatever, or grandma makes you an apple pie, you can say, "Oh no, grandma," don't hurt grandma's feelings.
Right.
But don't have apple pie every day of the year, which is
Exactly.
what people are basically doing with their lattes or their, everything else. So just I would say in most cases moderation for sugar because it's in
Hmm.
so many things. Once you figure that out, then you can be more in moderation because you'll have eliminated lots of it from your diet. But
Right.
until that point, I would say your focus should be on getting it down to as low as possible. And the newest guidelines from the government, I think, also support that. So
Mm.
yeah, that's health. By the way, the tobacco companies, just a little funny aside, the tobacco companies, which were so great at marketing cigarettes, bought several big food companies in the 1980s. Have now divested them, but they bought Kraft, they bought Nabisco, and
Mm.
they were some of the ones that transformed all these foods into these low fat, ultra processed, sugar, seed oil, unhealthy
Hmm.
foods. So,
Hmm. Yes, I could tell even from when the time my kids were young to now, 20 years span, say 25, 30, whatever. I could see the difference,
Yeah.
and you could taste the difference too.
Oh, that's thank you for that. That's the other brilliant thing. So when you quit sugar and or start reducing sugar and ultra processed foods,
Hmm.
your taste buds, which have been hijacked, as you just said, are going to rebound. And like today or this summer, when I have grow strawberries in my garden, and when I ate one of those strawberries, it was almost too sweet for me
Hmm.
because my taste buds have gone so far back to kind of the natural state. And so
Hmm.
things will taste so much better to you once your taste buds have a chance to rebound. So thank you for that. That's a great reminder.
No, definitely, it's something, and it also, when you grow your own food, you could taste the difference between what
Yeah.
comes out. It may not look the same. It may sometimes may not be the biggest pepper, okay,
Yep.
but the taste makes up for the size
Yeah.
completely. So,
Yeah. Yeah. Because our you're picking it at the peak of ripeness.
right.
You're not transporting it thousands of miles. A
Hmm.
lot of these fruits and vegetables are gassed, so you're not
Yeah,
gassing your fruit.
right.
And then I to me, a store-bought tomato, I won't even buy them anymore or store-bought strawberries because they taste almost like nothing to me or they have almost no
Hmm.
flavor.
Hmm.
Whereas, yeah, my tomatoes in my garden, I pick one of those late in the afternoon where they're warm from the sun, and
Yeah.
it's like, wow, yeah,
Yeah,
explosion of taste.
exactly, exactly.
Yeah,
And I don't use any type of additive to my soil, all
yep,
natural
yep,
stuff. There's a lot to be said for the scraps and the eggshells and all that stuff that
yep,
just the more natural the better. And you'd be surprised how much produce you can obtain and get from your own garden. It
yes,
doesn't have to
yes.
be that big,
Nope, you're right.
because
Yeah,
it grows differently to me.
yeah.
So,
And there are community gardens, there are master gardeners in communities all across the country. So if you don't know, have an experience with it, you can start there if you want, or just start with a
mhm,
windowsill and try it out. And especially if you have
right.
kids, because kids love watching, plant a seed and every day they're going to look at, is it growing? Is
Yep.
it growing? So yeah,
Yes,
yeah,
yes, yes, definitely. And it's so peaceful when you actually can get into your gardening and get back into working with the soil and just making it part of your day.
yep,
It's mm, to me is ideal. It calms me down. It
yep,
I don't I don't think about what's happening around me, and it's kind of like when I'm doing that, the whole rest of the world should disappears. I'm focusing on the soil, the plants, the water I'm doing, whatever it is, and the world really kind of just fades away. So,
yeah. Yeah, that leads to two good points. One, Dr. Josh Axe has a great book called Eat Dirt. And he doesn't mean that literally, but he means get your hands back in the dirt. We're so
right.
sanitized as a society. And so I think it's a fantastic book. And the other thing that brought up was how healing and calming being in the garden is. So that maybe is a good segue to talking about kind of how I found myself on a healing journey, if you want
Hmm.
me to.
Yes, please.
Okay. So, like I said, I was working these two jobs. I had my own business, and I was a college professor, and so I was, getting 4 hours of sleep a night at most, basically, and just burning through things. And finally, and I had people warning me, choose one. This is not sustainable. And I'm like, oh, of course, I'm going to be the one person that is sustainable. No, and so I realized I wanted to keep my business, so I decided I was going to um, just totally transformed my life. I didn't know exactly how or why. I guess this is where intuition or listening to signs from the divine or the universe,
Mhm.
wherever. And so I sold my house. I moved across the country. I bought 40 acres of raw land, and I thought it was beautifully forested. And I thought, wow, this is perfect. And then I had a forester friend who I had met come over, and he said, "This is the unhealthiest forest I've ever seen. It's way too thick, way too many trees. This is a fire hazard, and this and that." And so that led me to kind of dig into what it means to have a forest and what to do, what's a healthy forest. And so nature, so I
Mhm.
talk about these six modalities of healing. And for
Mhm.
me, and nature is one of them. And for me, I actually started an accidental healing journey in nature. So I spent 7 years or so, I can't remember exactly the number, in my forest. I had all 40 acres. I went through all 40 acres during those years and cut down trees, pruned them up, thinned them out. And during all this time alone, I faced all my demons because the nature was so calm and, like you said, just so inviting.
Mhm.
Share your secrets, let them out. And so this was the beginning of this forgiveness of myself and forgiveness of the people that had done things to me in my past. I had both childhood trauma and then abuse in my late teens by a priest. So, and I
Mhm.
just pushed those all aside. I just shoved them back there, and and for the first time during somewhere during that time period, I learned, hey, I'm okay. I'm allowed to have love. I'm allowed to love myself. And I realized that before that I had not loved myself. I had been seeking love in all sorts of ways. I'd gotten married, but it wasn't the greatest marriage, and I was 1 foot in, 1 foot out, some kind of thing,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
uh, couldn't understand it. And I uh, have now seen so many other healing stories that have a similar vein when you are because what happens is we either like I grew up in a household where you swept everything under the rug. No,
Mhm.
no, don't let the neighbors know anything bad is happening here. And so I just bottled all that up inside me.
Right.
And I had my son at one point went through several years of suicidal ideation, and at
Mhm.
one point I was sure he had accomplished the task because he had gone to the emergency room for something and then ran out of it and then was running in traffic. And I literally was at this traffic light and I said, okay, nope, I'm sealing my heart again. I'm accepting his death, and I'm just nope, it's not going to affect my life. I'm pushing it back there. And so that was also this release during this healing journey.
Mm.
Uh, that led to just learning more about healing. And then about 8 years ago, I guess, I was introduced to my wife introduced me to this podcast with Jesse Gould, who is the founder of this amazing nonprofit called Heroic Hearts Project, which sends veterans to mostly to Peru for ayahuasca psychedelic
Mm.
healing, but
Mhm.
also now in Oregon and maybe in the future in Colorado because it's still not for ayahuasca but for psilocybin because it's legal in those states now.
Right.
And he talked about his journey, which again is echoed by so many veterans, because basically veterans come back from whether it's Iraq, Afghanistan, or even as far back as Vietnam now,
Mhm.
and they get no counseling. They get basically, well, welcome back to civilian life. Thanks for fighting. Don't. Don't call
Mhm.
us, we'll call you. And he had gone to the VA, and VA said, well, the only thing we can give you a handful of pills. And he said, no, I don't believe in that. And he was doing kind of the alcohol for coping.
Mhm.
He didn't do drugs. A lot of veterans do, but he grew up in the dare. He said, no, no, no to drugs. And then one of his veteran friends said, hey, you should think about ayahuasca. And at first he said no because it's a drug, because
Mhm.
that's what dare taught everybody. And then he finally said, I can't cope with this. I need to do something. He went down there and had a transformative experience. And so that led him, of course, to develop the nonprofit. And that led me into saying, well, what about these psychedelic medicines? And again, the truth, we've been told all these lies since the 1970s about psychedelics, that
Mhm.
they're going to fry your brain, that you're going to jump off a building, you're going to do crazy stuff. And basically, why psychedelics were banned in the 1970s by Nixon and Congress was because the counterculture, which did use psychedelics mostly for recreation,
Mhm.
was getting so strong, and the anti-war movement had gotten so strong that Nixon felt this is a way to control society, by banning these
Mhm.
drugs. And that led to the war on drugs and all these things. And if we look at the true history, especially of psilocybin, of peyote, of these natural plant medicines, they go back time immemorial. Indigenous people have used them for healing, for community,
Mhm.
for growth since time began. And so to say these are dangerous or illegal, and yes, there are guidelines for doing it
Mhm.
intentionally, but
Yes. Yes.
to demonize them. And so that got my truth seeker really going. And so that
Mhm.
led me, again, I didn't think I was going to write a book about it. I just led me to start writing some articles about it, start talking about it, and then start experimenting myself with psychedelics. And I think from nature, I say I was about 80% healed on my healing journey.
Mhm.
And then these psychedelics took it to the 100% level, although we're never fully healed, and I still integrate stuff every day. But,
Right.
and so I've done most of the plant medicines now, but it was on LSD, which is not a plant medicine, but a contrived medicine, but from a
Mhm.
natural source. It was on an LSD journey, which for me is not so much healing, but mind expanding. And I was at the end of this psychedelic experience, which was just beautiful. And all of a sudden, it's inexplainable. It's hard, It wasn't a voice from God. It was some sort of energy, but energy is so hard. Anyway, it was something, an urge that came to me and said, "You need to write this book about psychedelics. Set the record straight."
Mhm.
But it's not going to be your book, because you're going to include stories from people that have done this, and they're going to show people the truth about these medicines. And so I ran inside, grabbed a pad of paper, ran outside because I felt like I had to be in the exact same spot, and I wrote down this outline that I got from, again, no one really knows whether it's whether it's the collective consciousness of everybody, whether it's God, whether it's aliens, whether it's
It's just
something, but there
I
is
just call it
something there.
divine energy. That's all I
Yes,
call it.
divine
And
energy.
yeah.
And the final book is about 75% of what that original outline. The only thing I didn't have in the outline was microdosing, which became very popular right as I was writing the book. So I added several chapters about microdosing. But so Triumph Over Trauma, my first book, which I thought was the one and done,
Mhm.
has 23 stories from people from all walks of life, all genders, all gender identities, or not maybe say all, but many, and ethnicities. As much as I could, I wanted to get as much diversity as possible in these
Right.
storytellers. And I dare anyone to read even just one of those stories and not start tearing up or feeling something. Even today, if I read one of the stories, like if I were doing a book reading or something, I probably couldn't do it because I'd end up having to stop and blow my nose and all that. So,
Mm-hmm.
so to me, what these psychedelics do is number one, they allow us to look back in our lives in a safe environment. It's almost like watching a movie of something and
Mm-hmm.
seeing it from an adult lens, rather, especially with childhood trauma, rather
Yes.
than as the child brain, which has no idea why this is happening to me.
Mm-hmm.
And so it helps us then, what I call becoming back to whole. When
Right.
we block off these traumas, we lose parts of ourselves. And
Mm-hmm.
so these and you can do this through therapy. You can often sometimes people can do this through meditation and breath work too if you're really advanced. So you don't have to do
Mm-hmm.
psychedelics if you're worried about them. But
Right.
to me, they help with healing. They help with spirituality. I love the story. This friend of mine who is an atheist. There is no God. There's no anything. You live, you die, you become plant food, or whatever.
Right.
He went on a psychedelic experience, and he said, "I saw the most beautiful things, and I'm not ready to call it God, but there is something more." And to me, that's the most beautiful thing. If we can
Yeah.
connect each other.
Mm-hmm.
Another veteran said right after his psychedelic experience, he said, "If I had done psychedelics earlier in my life, I never would have signed up for the army because these are all my brothers and sisters. But I didn't realize it before the medicine." And
Mm-hmm.
so there's that, and then just transformation in their lives, going from especially veterans, just because I see so much of that. But before healing, before these plant medicine, dead eyes, it,
Mm-hmm.
almost nothing behind. Like, wow, what has happened? What have they seen that has looked that? And then after
Right.
even just one ceremony, you can see the light coming back. And to me, that
Mm-hmm.
I think if every member of Congress would just talk to some of these people and hear the transformation, we would see a different stance on these plant medicines. They again,
Definitely.
it's not for everybody.
No.
And but for those that have tried everything, they've done therapy, they they don't want to be on meds the rest of their life. Look into it. They can also microdose, like I said, if they're afraid of the macrodosing, because microdosing is something that you take an amount that's imperceptible, so you don't feel it, but it's still working in the background. And the best
Mm-hmm.
example I have of that is I have a friend who both were in law enforcement, and the husband was actually shot in the line of duty and died, and then was resuscitated. And he remembers nothing of the shooting at all. He's seen a video of it because he's in a parking lot with a video camera, so he watched during the trial of this
Oof.
perpetrator
Yes.
go right above him and shoot him again. And so he's afraid of doing a full journey because he's afraid he doesn't want to relive that. And I kept trying,
Right.
and I'm like, well, you don't, you relive it, but in a totally different way.
Right.
Anyway, so he said, no, I don't want to do it. I said, fine, fine. But his wife convinced him to start microdosing. So he microdosed for a month, and he said, I don't know, I didn't feel anything. And then separately, I talked to the wife, and she said, "Oh my God, he's such a teddy bear on microdosing." And I was like, "Yes, see, it works, but oftentimes we don't see it.
Right. Right.
But these things are working behind the scenes. So microdosing is a great option for people. Uh, the other benefit of plant medicines is something we've only really learned in the last few years, which is this neuroplasticity that we used to think that, back in the 20s, our brain kind of peaked, and there really was no new learning capacity after that. And our main goal was to keep capacity. And so, like the old dog can't learn new tricks.
Right.
And now we know, and not just plant medicine, you can do this through forcing yourself to do new learning, do
Mm-hmm.
crosswords, do all these things. But we've learned that no, we can change our neuroplasticity. We can grow our brains. And so, but for plant medicines, the two parts to it that I love is these plant medicines naturally connect parts of the brains that have maybe never talked in the last 20, 30 years, depending on how
Mm-hmm.
old you are. And the other cool thing they do, and I don't know how they do this, the neuroplasticity I get, but for people that have OCD or even addiction that have sort of these brain connections that keep them in that loop,
Right.
plant medicines can snip them. And so we have people that have OCD or alcoholism or addicted to alcohol, and the next day after a ceremony, they are no OCD is gone, and they have no
Mm-hmm.
interest in touching another drink of alcohol. So it's these are powerful substances when used the right way and in the right conditions and with intention. So that and so that anyway, so that led to Triumph Over Trauma, which I thought
Mm-hmm.
was going to change the world. I found out during a book signing that people didn't like the word trauma because they thought it was too harsh. Like, I don't, I haven't experienced trauma. I don't have trauma, and I get that it's part of the ego protection. It's also part of
Mm-hmm.
denial.
Mm-hmm.
And so I thought, okay, well, maybe that's the wrong term. And then while I was writing the book, I realized that people who were doing psychedelics were also doing supportive elements to their healing. They were
Right.
doing, they were changing their diet. So there was a
Mm-hmm.
nutrition component. They were doing a somatic or movement component because we all some of that
Mm-hmm.
trauma stored in the body. They were doing breath work because breath work can immediately calm our nervous system. They
Mm-hmm.
were they were meditating or praying or growing their spirituality because that's a component of because we are again in this collective whatever we want to call it. And so that led me to say, okay, well, I guess I should write a second book called Heal. And I thought,
Mm-hmm.
well, heal is a better term than trauma because probably we all think we need to heal something.
Mm.
And I listed all these 6 modalities for healing, including psychedelics again, because I think that is an
Right.
important component. And then I thought I was done. But when I was writing the nutrition component of that book, the lies about health, you know, like for example, in the 1970s, glyphosate was introduced to this country, and now we've had 5+ decades of glyphosate in our food, and blood tests show that almost all of us have glyphosate in our blood system right now, and all conventional food products. So all
Mm-hmm.
those in the grocery store, but also all the produce and the veggies typically have glyphosate on them. And just recently, I saw that the President Trump has did an executive order of doubling down on glyphosate. And so all these lies came up for me during this research on nutrition. So I thought, okay, I have to write a book. And that's where the Healing Revolution diet came about. And that book, I think that the highlight of that book, and it's on my website, so you don't have to buy the book to see it, is the timeline. Because everyone who sees this timeline says, whoa, now that I see this in this nice, concise setup, I understand
Mm-hmm.
all the ways we've gone wrong with farming and food and even pharma.
Mm-hmm.
And then, that's became sort of the holistic healing series. And then just recently, I decided again this mission of mine, which I think is a divine mission. Uh, Again, in one of these psychedelic experiences, I just feel that this is what I'll be doing for the rest of my life unless I get a different mission assignment. But I put out Finding Wellness, which is 50 and 5 bonus articles, so 55 articles all together, just as a Kindle and audio book. And right now it's 99 cents on Amazon. And I did that at the most inexpensive level I possibly could because, again, all those 55 articles are on my various websites, but
Mhm.
you have to go find each one. So I thought I'm just going to do
Right.
a Kindle book, put them all in one spot with a
Mhm.
table of contents, and so that's the my latest and probably last book. But it's based on the idea of, again, just getting this information out there, making it accessible at either free or as low cost as I possibly can. Because I'm not out to sell books. I'm
You just
out
want
to
to
get
get this information out there to
yes,
everyone.
yes.
Yes.
I just want people to live their best lives, and that means focusing on their health. And again, not everybody needs a healing journey. I would say probably a big bulk of people. So if you, and I guess the one thing advice, I know we're probably running out of time, but I'd say we talk about triggers. So
Mhm.
if someone says something to you, or you read a news article or hear something, and it causes an extreme reaction, whether that's guilt or shame, anger, fear,
Mhm.
any emotion, any strong, especially negative emotion,
Right.
then I say don't run away from that. Embrace it, look into it slowly, carefully, safely.
Mhm.
But
Mhm.
what was it in that caused you to be so upset? And it's probably related to something that happened to you in your past. And
Mhm.
so I just say, again, to everybody, just if trauma is too strong a word, just say, I just want to resolve my past, and want to, I just want to be living in the present and the future,
Mhm.
not going back and living back there, which is, not a healthy thing.
No, it is not. It is not. Um, I have uh, myself. Of course, we all do. People say, "Oh no, I didn't go to trauma," but the way your father was brought up and he brought you up, that's a trauma.
Yeah.
I don't care what anybody says. It's like every single time I would see my father angry, I would say, "Oh, here we go." I am,
Yep.
you know, his famous thing was the belt, and
Oh yes.
it's like that's not making me learn anything. All that's making me do is know that if I go too far, you're going to get the belt. That's it.
Yeah.
It's not, it's
I,
not healthy.
yeah, I had the same thing, and mine was well. I don't think there's no
Right.
comparison, but mine
Yeah.
in my mind was worse because he was also an alcoholic, so he would swing a lot harder and a lot more often, and he didn't have to be very far out of line to get it.
Right.
But the other crazy part about that I just want to, I thank you for sharing that, because I was talking to a friend uh, years ago, and when I realized that, hey, my childhood was not normal, and he said, "Oh well, my dad spanked me and slapped me around, and that was just kind of
Mhm.
normal." And I think that's
Mhm.
the crazy part. As kids, I don't ever remember talking to any of my friends in all through any elementary to high school about my parents. I didn't talk to them about, how they parented, or if they beat me too often, or any of that. So I think it's just a weird thing we do as children to rationalize that this must be normal. It's
Mhm.
probably happening in every house around me. I don't like it, but it must be normal, because why would my father or my mother be doing this to me? And again, that's a child brain that doesn't
Yeah.
understand.
Yeah. That they had their own trauma and their own. He was probably self-medicating with the
Yep.
alcohol, in his
Yeah.
own
Oh
way.
yeah.
So that's the
Yeah.
thing. Well,
Yeah. So that
yeah.
I was just gonna say that's we talk about intergenerational trauma, and that is
Mhm.
part of that, because we're how our parents were raised,
Mhm.
and it does carry through that way. And some researchers are even looking at it in terms of it carrying on through the woman's eggs because they're born while they're
Mhm.
in the fetus. All their eggs are developed for their entire lives, so
Right.
they're being implanted or affected by whatever's happening to that mother.
Yep.
And so that's another place where trauma is actually carried on biologically. So it's not just the how they were raised, but also biology plays a role in that. So it's fascinating and scary. But again, the good news is we can mostly overcome, these child, especially childhood
Hmm.
experiences.
Yes, we could overcome it. We could work through it. We
Yeah,
can release that energy that attaches to you that doesn't allow you to grow or move on.
yeah,
Um, and it's just, and like you said, it isn't just food. It isn't just working through this. It isn't. It's a combination of everything. You have to work on the multi levels
yeah,
of you so you can live your better life.
yeah,
So.
yeah. I mean, even today, even though I feel like I've healed so much, I still during my meditation, not all meditations, but certain
Mhm.
meditations, I try and say, hey, little Randy, if you want to come out and talk, it's a safe space because there
Mhm.
still are a few periods of my childhood that I have zero memory of. And
Mhm.
so I know there's something there. And I
Mhm.
just I just want, that inner child to feel safe. I mean, some people are gonna be like, oh, well, that sounds weird, but it is
Ah,
important to do that inner child work.
yes, definitely.
Yeah.
I'm a big believer in that. So we are running out of time. I just
Yep.
want to thank you for being here and
No, thank
explaining
you.
everything and sharing your experiences. Not everybody does. Um, and I definitely want to, leave the invitation open because, okay, when you said that was probably the last book, but just wanted to let you know that. So
Yeah.
I'm going to now just say thank you again and thank you
Yeah.
to the audience.
Thank you.
We appreciate you. And as always, I love you. Bye.
Take care.